Hello there, Zombie Sashimi here. I've recently been getting into writing some short stories. I don't think I am particularly very good, but I do enjoy the process of writing. Most of the short stories I'm writing at the moment are based in the Corvus Belli Infinity universe, but recently I got to painting some very old Necromunda sculpts of like bounty hunters and hired guns. And that kind of got me thinking a little bit about the whole Necromunda scene. As a child, I collected quite a lot of Necromunda. I really enjoyed it a lot. And so this was kind of like a nice blast from the past in terms of painting up some old models and remembering some of the games I used to play. So I decided I wanted to do something a bit different for my short story this time. So Infinity is usually quite a serious affair. It's not too much. There's a little scope to have some fun with it and things, but comparatively, the Warhammer 40,000 universe has kind of a lot going on in it, where you can kind of tailor a story around any kind of style that you like. So Necromunda is a good opportunity to kind of explore some story arcs or story stylings or writing stylings that I haven't done previously in my Infinity short stories. So I thought this would be kind of fun to do a kind of a schlocky kind of story from. And it all just started with when I was painting one of my models, and I just got to thinking of, oh, what if he's just hanging around in a bar and then someone just decides to attack him and just go from there. So I literally just started off with a scene where I just wrote him relaxing in a bar when someone just kicks off a fight with him. From then on, after the fight scene that I wrote, I just kind of carried on writing just to see where it would go. So this story has a lot of question marks on it, lots of threads which are completely left open, and so it's not the most structured kind of short story that I've ever written, but it was kind of fun to do, so I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Hired Gun Part 1. What have I got myself into? Jonas was drifting off when the bar stool, wooden crate that the bar was using in place of a proper stool that was propping up his feet, was kicked away. He was just able to slip under the Goliath ganger's swinging arm. A second later, and he would have been in that mohawked gorilla's grip, probably having his eyeballs squeezed out of his head. The Goliath was twice the size of him, and luckily half as fast. When the big man swung again, Jonas had no difficulty in ducking out of reach and stepping back to give himself some distance and time to shake off the malaise of his napping. Jonas raised both hands in a gesture of peace with open palms. Hey, just minding my own business here, no need to get in half. If you wanted to see, all you had to do is ask. The giant was breathing heavily with fury, his muscular arms flexing in agitation. The man was big, and I don't mean just a lot of body weight big, he was pure muscle. The only human that could be considered bigger was perhaps an Astartes. But could you really consider them human? The Goliath had a red mohawk, a nose ring with a chain leading to his ear, and a spiked collar with 5 more chains leading down to his belt. Following the length of the chains, each was connected to a weapon of some kind or another. Jonas made out an auto pistol. The thing looked old and in disrepair. It probably jammed as many times as it shot. Another chain led to a serrated knife. When sized against the Goliath, it looked like a knife, but it was probably closer in size to a short sword. The third was worrying, as it seemed to be connected to a pair of workman's pliers. The pliers weren't the worrying thing as such, but the very ingrained bloodstains and string of teeth tied to the handle as a trophy were. The other 2 chains disappeared into hidden parts of the Goliath's attire. It was probably best not to dwell on what was at the other end of them. The monster of a man raised his hand and pointed at Jonas. "I'll kill you, sewer rat!" He then reached for the auto pistol by his side.
No frickin' guns, not in my place, unless you want me to finish the conversation.
The master of the bar, old Stig, was pointing a shotgun at the Goliath's head, at a safe distance, mind, and behind his counter. It was amazing how just a few feet and a short wall gave some men all the confidence in the world. Stig wasn't much to look at with his scrawny, almost skeleton frame. His clothes hung off him as if pulling the little man down even further, but never judge a book by its cover in the underhive. If he had managed to reach the age he was, that meant he knew how to survive. The Goliath swung his head around to look at Stig, weighing up his options, before deciding to holster the pistol. As he did so, Stig relaxed his hold of the gun. Not enough to be unable to blast the other man's head off at a moment's notice, but enough to say, "I will leave you be if you leave your piece be."
Fine by me. Don't mind getting my hands dirty. Might make a bit of a mess, mind.
He then cracked his knuckles in his hand as he stepped toward Jonas. Jonas gave an exasperated look towards Stig, who simply looked back and shrugged.
You gotta be frickin' kidding me. Sorry, Stig.
Jonas pulled out a bolt pistol lightning quick. This was not some knockoff that a gang leader would be seen posing with. Oh no, this was the real deal, with real bolt ammo loaded. The gun was a rarity in and of itself, but the ammo was dearer. Jonas had spent a lot to keep that thing locked, loaded, and in good nick. And he hated having to use it when he wasn't getting paid. But needs must. He pulled the trigger and the bullet went think into the Goliath's skull. It was so sudden that the Goliath just had a blank look of confusion, his sewer slop of a brain not able to compute what just happened. Jonas wasted no time and tipped the table over and hid behind it for cover. Stig did likewise and ducked down fast behind the bar, but his loud muttering could be heard and was probably meant to be heard by Jonas.
By the frickin' light of the Emperor, Jonah!
Boom! The Goliath's head disintegrated as the explosive tipped round blew away everything from the shoulders up. Bits of bone, brain matter and viscera painted the bar. The wall behind Jonas had a perfect circular silhouette of the table he hid behind, as most of the wall was painted with a new coat of crimson. Jonas peeked over the table before standing up.
Would you look at that?
The ganger, now with a crater where his head and neck used to be, was still standing there, a squirt of arterial blood pumping rhythmically into the air.
Do something about it, Jonas. It's given me the willies.
Jonas stepped out from behind the fallen table, still with the bolt pistol pointed at the bleeding statue. Cautiously getting closer, he poked it with the barrel of the gun, and slowly but surely gravity took hold and the body leant back and collapsed on the floor. More blood spilling out from the stump slewed out across the barroom floor.
By the Emperor's light, Jonas, I said no frickin' guns, didn't I?
Jonas looked at Stig innocently, raising his eyebrows, and gave a shrug.
I thought that was just a way to disarm him, not me. How many times have you darkened my door and you never once read the sign?
Stig gestures to a piece of wood hanging by two chains from the ceiling, now swinging and dripping red ichor. Jonas looks at it as if seeing it for the first time. Whatever had once been written on it had long since gone, and just some odd paint strokes were left that had somehow managed to stay on over the years of neglect.
Is that what it says? Oh well, now I know for next time. Jonas, you son of a lashworm. There better not be a next time. What in the hive did this scumsucker want with you?
Jonas ponders the question himself as he looks over the body. As he does so, his eyes get drawn to a tattoo on the chest of teeth snapping through a bone. Sorry, Stig, but I don't know. I have to go. Something about this doesn't sit right with me.
And leave me with a dead Goliath in the bar? How am I supposed to explain that when his mates come knocking, huh?
Oh, I'm sure you will think of something. You always do. Stig throws his arms in the air in frustration. You know that ain't the point, Jonas. Jonas reaches into the coat pocket, pulls out a triangular coin and places it on the bar. With piqued interest, Stig looks down at the coin to take in the markings. His eyes goggle when he realizes what he's looking at. That's a Helmar coin. Where the hell did you get your hands on that? Is it worth enough Gilder to pay for the mess and possible trouble coming? Stig scratches his chin as he ponders the question, unable to take his eyes off the coin on the table. Sure, it pays for it. Stig reaches over, and the moment the coin is in his hands, it is gone. But now I have so many more questions. Jonas downs his drink and gasps at the kick it gives. Stig never watered down his spirits, but maybe he should. This stuff could strip paint. Hell, he probably cleaned the place with it. That would explain why the sign was ineligible. Jonas pulls up the bolt pistol for a quick inspection. You're gonna have to keep them to yourself for now, but if I get myself out of this mess, maybe I'll share the story with you over a bottle of Amasek. Stig chuckles to himself. That'll be the day. Get out of here before I change my mind about helping you. Jonas gives Stig a quick nod as he holsters the bolt pistol before sweeping his trench coat over it, hiding it under the folds. Leaving the bar, the street is empty. Mutated rats scurry away, alerted by his presence. Looking left to right, Jonas takes a moment to ponder his next move. Why did that Goliath come after him? And how did he know where to find him? Typically, Goliaths weren't known for their brains, but that brute had been from the Bone Eaters gang, and it was no coincidence that he came into Stig's joint without knowing he was going to find Jonas there. No time to dawdle. He had to find somewhere safe to work out his next move and try to figure out the situation he had found himself in. He liked to be the hunter, not the hunted. Maybe he could still turn the tables. It was then that it hit him. The emptiness of the street and the unerring quiet put Jonas on edge. Something wasn't right, but he wasn't going to let himself panic. He had to move, but he needed to not draw attention to himself. Maybe find a crowded place. If he was being followed, which his intuition screamed he was, that was where he could lose a tail. Get lost in the herd. Time to head to Scrounger's Market. At this time of day, they would be in full trade. It was midday. Not that it meant anything this far down in the hive, but that's when the factory's waste from the upper levels hit this particular part of the underhive the worst. All scavengers used this time to sell whatever they had found the previous night. Gangers had a truce to barter freely, and those who had Gilder could spend it on leisure activities or be targeted by those who didn't. He turned down towards Scrounger's Market, but it was still some streets away. He was sure that there were eyes in the shadows watching him as the hairs on the back of his neck stood at attention. He had learned to trust his intuition. It was what had kept him alive this long. If he ran, his tail would know he knew, and he was too far from the market for that. Jonas was now approaching an alley, and his sense of urgency to turn down it and out of sight from whatever was following him was great. Just as he came close to the alley's mouth, he ducked toward it. It was just in time too, as he heard the crack of a rifle and felt the whiz of the bullet as it passed where his head was. The shot pierced a metal pipe coming down from the wall of the alley, and pressurized steam whistled out of the punctured hole. Jonas's mind raced as he tried to piece together what was happening. There was no way a Goliath could sneak up on him the way this pursuer did. But now wasn't the time to stop and contemplate who was chasing him. Now the real chase was on, and he leaped down the corridor, striding through the tight alley as fast as his legs could carry him, hopping over waste pools, weaving between tight pipes and jumping over old barrels. He moved like the wind. Rats scattered at his approach, but one particularly gruesome looking specimen stood its ground, arched its back, and prepared to leap at Jonas as he tore toward it. The rat was missing an eye. Its teeth were long, ferocious, and most certainly disease-ridden. Its body bloated from waste rot. It was twice the size of any of the other rats in the alley. Before it could jump and tear into Jonas's face, he kicked it at full force as he strided past it. The creature exploded into a spray of rotted guts and fur. Another pair of shoes ruined. There was no way he was going to get that smell out of them if he was going to survive this particular jam. Just as he had the thought, the gunfire started again as his pursuer began firing shots off with his rifle. The shots were ringing around him, but not making their mark now that he had managed to get some distance. However, that didn't stop him from flinching at each crack of the rifle, bringing his hands over his head as he ducked and weaved away. Just up ahead, Jonas could make out some of the bustle of people. He was almost at the market. Whoever was after him seemed relentless. Getting into the market was his best shot at getting away, or, better yet, turning the tables. The alley was also getting tight as barrels and wooden crates were built up, restricting movement. Jonas had to vault over a blockade, and as he did so, another shot rang out, and he felt the bullet hit. Landing with his back to the blockade for cover, he quickly checked his body. No blood. Checking the hole made in his jacket, the bullet had managed to pass between his arm and upper body as he vaulted. An inch to the right and he would have had a wounded arm. An inch to the left and he would have been seriously injured, probably with a punctured lung or at least some shattered ribs. It rattled Jonas, but only for a second as he gathered himself and made a dash for the market. There were no more shots and he was able to round the corner and move into the crowd. Now, to find out who had been following him, Jonas moved through the market, slipping in and out between the hagglers, gangers and merchants that were filling the street. He quickly caught his bearings and where he had just come from. There was a small shop he knew that had a view of the street from inside. It was a perfect little hole to be hidden in and gave a clear view of the street, including the alley he had just come from. The shop had steps rounding the building that you climbed to an entrance. A sign outside written in red paint, or at least Jonas hoped it was red paint, read, "The Scrap Heap." Inside it was dark and filled wall to wall with old junk. There was a crate full of old pistols and weapon parts, all rusted and useless. One rack had a number of large blunt instruments with a sign that read, "Tools of the Trade." Looking at them, the trade seemed to be a violent one. Half of the tools had bloodstains splattered over the business ends. The window overlooking the street was less of a window and more of a hole in the wall. But the shop had such little light that the darkness gave cover from anyone trying to look in. Jonas casually made his way over to the window, nodding to the shop owner who just met his gaze and spat on the floor as if to say, "You better not try anything in here." Jonas made it look like he was browsing the man's wares as he picked up a curving pipe with valves and a big dial jutting out from it. Jonas had no idea what it was, but made a show of looking like he did as he kept an eye on the street through the window. Watching the dark shadow of the alley, he was about to give up when he saw something moving. Very slowly, but purposefully, a pale face emerged from the dark, looking down the street. Black goggles wrapped around the face and a tall, skinny frame with a large black overcoat entered the street. Taller than most of the denizens in the market, it moved through the crowd like an eel in water, shifting and ebbing through the waves of people. The head sweeping from left to right and back again, searching, an unchanging expression of cold calm. Delac, without a doubt. Now why were those sneaky hive snakes working with the Goliath gang? There's bad blood between the gangs in this area of the Underhive, and it would take a miracle or a lot of gilder for them to even consider working together. So he expected it was the latter. Now if only he could figure out how he figured into this whole mess. Well, now there was someone to ask, and it was Jonas in the driving seat now. Jonas dropped the weird piece of junk he had been handling and turned to the shop owner who was still eyeballing him. Jonas pointed to one of the tools of the trade, a long pipe with a leather strap at the bottom as a handle. "How much?" "8 guilder." It was a rip-off. But Jonas didn't have time to argue. He threw the man a chit worth 10, took the pipe off its rack and masterfully hid it under his trench coat as he left the shop. Jonas wasn't a particularly big man. In fact, he would be considered shorter than average, which suited him just fine for situations like the one he was now in. The Delac, on the other hand, stood almost a head taller than everyone else in the street, making it very easy for Jonas to keep his distance and tail the ganger. The Delac circled the entire market 3 times before it looked like he gave up and returned to the alley he had originally come from. That's when Jonas came up from behind the barricade, swinging the pipe into the Delac ganger's head. He fell like a sack of corpse starch. The Delac was tall, but his skin was so tight and his frame so thin he looked like a skeleton. And even Jonas was surprised at how easy it was to pick up his unconscious body. Jonas had already scouted an empty sewer drain. It was just like the ones that the gangs used to get around undetected in the hive. But no one was using this one as there had been a cave-in from the upper level. Just a quiet hidey hole where no one would disturb them. Using a large steel grate that was once used to prevent people or horrors from entering the pipe as a passageway, Jonas propped the Delac against it. He took the ganger's hands and pulled them behind his back before tying them around the grate. Now, when he came to, he would have nowhere to go. He was Jonas's plaything. All the gangs had some kind of insignia, tattoo, or call sign on them to signify what gang they were part of, even these shadow dwellers. Delac didn't show it as obviously as gangs from the other houses, but they still had them just the same. Looking behind the pale bald head, Jonas found a tattoo at the base of his neck. There was what appeared to be a snake coiled with its head just visible as if sleeping. He was a viper. Not a gang known to be operating in this part of the Underhive. Probably also why he didn't see any other Delac with him. It was time to wake this son of a lashworm up and get some answers.